Welcome back. Here with us on Times Now, those who doubted the valor of our braves, questioned their actions at the battlefield and mocked their sacrifice, must hear this definitive voice on what really happened on 15th of June at the Galwan Valley. The first official record is only here on Times Now. General Narasimhan, who is a member of the National Security Advisory, gives us a blow-by-blow account of how China laid a pre-planned trap of treachery, but our braves displayed valor under fire. They not just took down their enemies, defended our territory, but they did it with discipline and precision. Listen in.
We are now speaking with General Narsimhan, member of the NSAB, at a time, General Saab, when the opposition led by Rahul Gandhi has raised questions that seem to suggest that the Indian army was somewhat disadvantaged by a timorous NDA. Now, you will be the first authoritative voice from government to tell us what happened really at the Galwan Valley during those crucial hours on which so many questions are being asked. So, General, first of all, describe the situation there, and why is it that the Indian armed forces, the personnel, did not resort to firing their weapons?
Okay, thanks for that question, Rahul. On the 6th of June, when the Lieutenant General level talks took place, there was a consensus that was arrived at for the disengagement process. And for that disengagement process, further talks were to be taking place on the places where the face-offs are, and from then the modalities were to be discussed. On 15th of June, when this process was on, one of our patrols and one of our columns which went to that area found a tent of the Chinese PLA on our side. They asked the Chinese PLA to leave, and then they took down the tent and then pitched our own. At that point in time, a little later than that, the Chinese turned back again with a larger strength. That is when that melee started. And by that time, I would like you all to understand that it was dark. It was in the evening. It was getting dark at that point in time. The altercation happened, and you found that when this stone throwing, using of batons, etc., was being resorted to, you found that the Chinese casualties also started coming up, and both the sides started suffering casualties. And it was a melee of, say, hundreds of people in a very small area. I would like you to imagine that in darkness, in a close kind of a fighting situation, and that is the kind of situation it was there. And there are reports which have come up, why were our troops sent without weapons, etc. The weapons were very much there, and nobody goes into such situations without the weapons with them. So weapons were there. And please also understand, there are protocols that we follow on the line of actual control, that we do not open fire. And to good measure, even the Chinese also did not open fire that day in spite of suffering casualties. That is not a consolation. That is not a justification I am trying to give. The issue that comes up is that our side was as prepared as the other side. And as for why fire was not open, please understand, in such a close area, when hand-to-hand fighting is going on, if you were to use the firearms, then you see the number of casualties that would have mounted. What casualties you saw now, it would have been many times that.
And General Narsimhan, many questions have been asked, and you said that this was a small area, it was getting dark. Reports suggest that this happened sometime between 7 p.m. and midnight. And you're right, it was darkness at that time. The question many are asking is, and even Mr. Rahul Gandhi has raised this question, that in a situation where the commanding officer was seeing casualties on his side, do you at that time also keep protocols in mind and not use your weapons or fire in order to, protect your own boys who are with you? Do you once that protocol has already been broken by the Chinese who came back and put their tent, and then the melee happened, why were the Indian side still going on following the protocol and not saving lives, is a question many in the opposition have asked. Would you like to explain what really happened?
There are 2 points that we need to look at. One is the protocol was on not opening fire. That protocol was followed. But second point that we need to understand is, once the commanding officer became a casualty, he fought valiantly, he became a casualty. The second in command, or whosoever was in charge at that point in time, he would have actually taken a call seeing what was happening on ground. If he had seen that opening fire would be more detrimental than to fight in a close kind of a battle, he would have actually taken that call. And I think being on the ground, having taken that decision, I think that decision has to be respected. Because none of us were there on the ground at that point in time. It is that gentleman who was there. He took that decision. I think that is the right decision that he took.
And the question has also been raised that probably the political bosses in Delhi were sleeping, is the word Mr. Rahul Gandhi has used, and they did not know about the satellite images and the build-up that was happening on the Chinese side. How would you respond to that?
Firstly, this is an event which has taken place after the initial events took place in the first week of May. And to say that, people were not looking into it, I'm not talking about Mr. Rahul Gandhi, that he is, whatever he said, as he said. I am talking about the situation on ground, and I am talking about how the situation evolved from the first week of May. First week of May, we know that the incidents took place in Pankung So, the incident took place in Nakula, and thereafter the incident took place in Galwan Valley. Thereafter, the situation has remained tense in those areas. Talks have been going on. Higher level military commanders have been talking. 6th June, the Lieutenant General level talks took place. I mean, all these things have taken, have been happening over a period of a month plus.
Okay.
I'm sure everybody, military, the diplomatic level, the government level, everybody was watching this.
So General, let me ask you, because I'm now going to quote General H.S. Panak. And he said that protocols were only for border management. This is a kinetic situation where you have a complete conflagration, where casualties are being racked up, and therefore all rules of engagement go out of the window. He seems to imply that maybe more heavier weaponry could have also been used. How do you respond to that?
Two things in this. In fact, part of it I had answered earlier. You were actually seeing a situation where hundreds of people were in a hand-to-hand fight in a smaller area. Suppose if you had opened fire at that time, and I respect the decision of the officer who was in charge on that spot, he would have been the best judge to take that call. Second thing is, if you had to fire artillery in a small area where our troops as well as their troops are mixed up, tell me how will it have an effect? Even we would have suffered a lot of casualties in that bargain. And the next aspect that we need to keep in mind is it is not only it is the LAC which has been peaceful, despite the fact that it is not clear on ground. On the other hand, look at the LOC. Even when the LOC is marked clearly on the map, still you find firing going on every day. You react in this manner, you would have converted this LAC into the LOC, and for perpetuity, you will have this problem coming up on our hands. So these things need to be looked into in a much more detail. And second point is, if you look at that area where this incident was taking place, it was a mountainous area. It was on the higher reaches of the mountainous area. The effectiveness of the artillery in mountainous areas is approximately 10%. Even that wouldn't have given that kind of effect that one is expecting to. For satisfaction purposes, one can keep saying anything. But I think a lot of factors need to be taken into account before we take a call on anything to open fire across the line of actual control.
Well, General Narsimhan, I'd like to ask you one question, which is, has the National Security Advisory Board been taken into confidence at any stage in the last 1 month when we've seen tense position along the LAC in this sector? Number one. And number two, what was man for man, the presence of Indian troops versus the Chinese troops on 15th of June when this incident took place?
First question first. In the National Security Advisory Board, I look after China, and I have been involved in this right from day one. So that point should be answering your question. The second point on the man-to-man issue, when the Chinese came back, we were outnumbered, not to a major extent, but yes, we were outnumbered. But still, the kind of fight that the boys put up there actually would have sent a solid message to the Chinese on that day.
My last question to you, General Saab, we've been hearing that our commanding officer put up a very, very brave front. In fact, he knocked out quite a few people. It was the Chinese commanding officer who fell first, and the Chinese have suffered a number of casualties. Can you put a number on those casualties? We believe some officers have also been taken casualty on the Chinese side.
Firstly, I've been saying on many channels again, it'll be extremely to put a specific number to the casualties that the Chinese suffered, basically because, I'll come to the question of the commanding officer later, basically because after evacuation had taken place, the Chinese helicopters were seen landing and picking up the casualties. It will be extremely difficult to say how many of them passed away after they reached the hospital and other things. That kind of figures will only be available with the Chinese side. However, we are given to understand that the Chinese commanding officer also lost his life in the battle, and along with him, some more officers also were casualties, and those casualties occurred right at the initial stages, even before our commanding officer laid down his life.
Mr. Narsimhan, it's always very tempting to ask you questions, because you're the only real insider who's spoken so far. There are reports and there has been speculation over the Ministry of External Affairs as well as the Army coming out with a statement that there are no missing men on the ground. But that statement probably came, and the speculation says, because 10 of our people happened to land on the other side when this scuffle happened and the landslide caused people to fall off. Can you confirm or deny whether there were missing people till yesterday 3 p.m. or it was just the 20 casualties that were reported earlier?
See, it is like this. I was explaining this incident the way it happened on the 15th of June in the darkness. How many people were actually milling around in a very small area. We should understand as to how these things happen and what is the after effect of this. After this incident would have happened, at night it would have been extremely difficult to have a head count and then head count of men, weapon, ammunition, etc., etc. What would have happened is, in the morning, that process would have started. In the morning, what had happened was, first thing was to evacuate the casualties that were existing at that point in time. So first effort would have gone into taking the casualties back so that they can be given the treatment and revived, whosoever could be revived. Thereafter, the head count and other things would have started taking place. In such a melee, what happens is people could go left and right, and for them to get back into the unit, to have a head count, etc., would have taken some time. That is one aspect that could have actually been happening, so that these 10 people came in later. The other thing that could have happened is, in the melee, when pushing and pulling is taking place, when the fighting is taking place, it could very well happen that these people would have probably ended up on the other end and would have been retained in case that happened. So, in all probability, it is in the process of all these things, if something like that could have happened, it would have happened. But the very fact is, today, the Chinese Foreign Ministry also has given a statement saying that they have not retained or they have not arrested any of our soldiers. And yesterday, after the statements came out, the figure was given, and then all men are accounted for as the statements that have been given out. So even if in the melee, if some people have been missing, now all of them have come back and accounted for, and that's what matters.
So General Saab, there's no point you're saying that any of our men, the 10 men, were detained by the Chinese?
They could have been held by the Chinese, but I won't say they were detained. In the sense that in the melee, if they had gone on to the other side, they could have been with them for some time. There are procedures in place in such cases to discuss and get these people back, and that could have happened in case they were on the other side.
Well, that happened with Colonel Abhinandan as well on the Pakistan side, and we know what happened on that side. Do you have any information on whether we were in any situation close to that?
No, I don't think so. And comparing Pakistan and China will be comparing like apples and oranges. So they deal differently, and I don't think any of them were harmed.
Well, I think that does put all speculations to rest. General Narsimhan, thank you very much for joining Rahul and me on the Explosive Exclusive, because what you've said is probably the most detailed account of what transpired between the dusk and the midnight of June 15th and 16th. Thank you very much, General Narsimhan, for joining.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for speaking to us.